This video is continuation of my previous videos which I had made on strategy with respect to civil service exam. I felt that strategy part was over, but then after reviewing answers on Telegram channel, I felt there were certain things which I felt that people might be knowing and I took for granted. Now after reviewing answer script, I feel that I should also cover those aspects in my strategy videos. For that purpose, I made this video. Please watch it. First thing that I want to discuss is premise of the civil service exam. We all know that UPSC through this exam searches for best talent for bureaucracy, by which it is logical to conclude that requirement of bureaucracy and requirement of this exam should have certain correlations. I will prove it through cogent evidence a bit later, but let's understand the bureaucracy and its requirement. Bureaucracy requires people who can talk to the point without making circumlocution or indirect or confusing statement, make meaningful arguments and analyze a scenario when given. So you must be understanding something similar happens or UPSC tries to do through its exam and through its papers, be it through case studies or different kind of current affairs and those things. If whatever was the premise that I discussed, based on that I want you to solve a CSAT question. If let's say those premise statements are true, which among the following you think are best suitable? First is, these statements I have not taken from vacuum. I have seen that students have tendency to or certain kind of attitude that have been mentioned in different options. First is filling up the space provided by UPSC in answer script, or in general try to fill up the word limit without caring much about the demand of the question, what actually the answer should be. The next is, people believe if they write less, that would fetch lesser marks. So even at the cost of questions that they know well and they can spend the time there, they try to write those questions and wasting time on those questions which they do not know, under the hope that if they write more, they might get more. Third thing is about presentation of the answer. Most of the people do present their answer good, but then there are people who know answer well, they have good language and content, but they fail to present their answer in a good manner. So this could become very frustrating and may not be in favor of good marks. So please avoid it. The D option that I feel is correct. In a full-fledged test series or in exam hall scenario, you may be knowing only 12 to 15 questions. That is an optimistic number. And for 5 to 6 or 3 to 5 questions, you have to write something and somehow complete those questions so as to attempt maximum number of questions. But then for those questions, you can allocate 15 to 25 minutes in the end. Remaining time you should focus on whatever know and write those answers very well, because that is where you are going to get good marks. And in last 15-25 minutes, attempt question which you do not know. If the topic is known, make some relevant key points, draw flowchart, diagram, something, and try to somehow complete. That should be your strategy. But then not addressing the demand of the question where you know and spending time on those questions which you don't know, I think is not a good strategy. So that is one aspect that I wanted to discuss. Rest I will discuss ahead. So as I said that I will give you an evidence to support my argument. So there is a video by an examiner of UPSC who has come openly and explained what UPSC gives instruction to its examiners with respect to how to evaluate mains answer script. So you can go and watch that video, link is in the description. However, here I have included the key idea discussed in that video. The first, whether key demands of the question has been addressed by the aspirant. So every question has key demand and you have to address key content on that demand. Whether you have written whatever relevant points are with respect to that question or with respect to that demand, that is second thing. And third, it discusses about language and keywords. So these are the broadly key areas that a aspirant should focus to improve them over the period as one does the answer writing. So these should be the key targets. Now we know what are the things that we have to improve, but then people adopt different strategies. Some strategies are good and may work in the direction of improving them, but I believe there are certain strategies also which people carry in their mind, but I think they will not be very helpful, and I'm going to discuss helpful my strategy as well as common notion that people carry. First, people ask whether to write, when to start writing answer, and many people even start writing from the day one. And sometimes they make requests like, "Sir, I have written answer. I am not very versed with the content, and I have recently started preparing. Please examine or review my answer." So I think that it should not be your strategy writing from day one. And when you do not know how to address that demand of the question, how can you write a answer? You may be knowing some content on that topic. You may write a general answer, but that would not be very helpful one. You may not be able to address these demands. But then as you go on practicing in this way, what happens, you develop a habit and you become negligent of the facts that of these requirements, because you are under the habit of this. So I think from day one, writing answer is not desirable. There are also people who would write any sort of questions, whatever, from wherever they will get the question, they will write and ask me to review it. Sometimes I see those questions which I myself believe are not important and may not ever be asked. Yes, UPSC sometimes asks questions which were not very common or very expected, but these questions are few. Most of the questions are those which are related to syllabus or are prominently in news. I think you should practice those questions. Your target should be practicing first, completing previous year questions. But then what people do, they would, from wherever they would get question, they will just write answer and ask for review. So their notion is that writing more number of questions would ultimately lead improvement in their answer writing, maybe on these front also. But that will not happen if you do not make changes in your writing styles. You do not practice conscious improvement will not come by itself naturally. It has to be practiced. You have to put pressure on your brain. You have to take pain of analyzing your answers. This is what I am going to discuss, how you can do. Some people say when to start writing. The strategy that I am going to give to you, that can be adopted even at very early stage of your preparation, but then it is not a full-fledged answer writing. In fact, I believe full-fledged answer writing you can do, those people who have given few attempts and they can do that. Or if you are beginner, you can do after prelims is over and you can do that time full-fledged answer writing. You have sufficient time. Meanwhile, you can build on these areas, so you do not have to begin from the very basic. You have to just practice your answer. You have to build up your speed. I'm going to discuss it with respect to points that examiner explained in his video and I have mentioned it earlier. First thing is addressing demand. That is the key thing, and I felt that these things went missing in many of the answers that I reviewed. So why people do not address the demand when it is so much desired? There could be two reasons. Even experienced people, even people who top the exams, sometimes may not address the demand of the question. This happens, as I discussed, there are certain questions which you do not know very well. In those questions are actually attempted in last 15 to 25 minutes, and you do not have to worry about demand of the question. You have to write some relevant point with respect to that topic, so that you get just marginal marks and becomes a few marks adds to your score. That's it. So that for that reason you can miss the demand of the question, because you do not know the answer. The second is reason that I am making this video. People start writing at very naive stage. At that time they do not know about idea of addressing demands. They become very happy just because they wrote an answer with respect to that topic. For example, a topic is on global warming. So anyone can mostly, if I have some ideas and read newspaper, can write. But then that question will be having some specific requirement, let's say with respect to melting of glacier in Himalayas. So a beginner may not understand all the aspect, may not have that content to address that demand. So what happens, he will write an answer without practice. What happens, and when these things happen repeatedly, what this becomes a habit. Even if you do not develop a habit, what happens when you are under the time pressure, for example while writing a full-fledged test series or in exam hall, you revert back to this habit of not addressing the demand. I think at no point of time when you write answer, whenever you practice answer, the demand of the question should always be in your thought process, and based on that you should write answer. So now the obvious question become, beginners do not have content for that. So I will tell my strategy for beginners. Other two requirements are, before discussing about the addressing how to address demand, other two requirements are content and language. See, for content is building, it is a constant exercise. You have to work hard. You have to read several standard books. You have to read other materials, current affair and ARCs and whatnot, and you have to make proper notes. For that I have explained in a previous video. The link to that video I am giving in the description. You have, if you want to watch or haven't watched yet, you can watch that. The last requirement was about language and keywords. For that also we have made a video. I am putting link to that video as well in the description. If you want, you can watch that. So those things are have been explained earlier. I think those people whose answer script I've been reviewing, I think they do not make much error, or things do not go much wrong with respect to these sort of things. The thing is, with respect to addressing demand, I will be discussing that aspect further now. See, if you are a beginner, what you can do is, if when you have a question, begin with previous year questions of UPSC. Obviously, what you do, for any question you can write introduction and conclusion. See, if it's a syllabus keyword, it is expected you must be having either data or some context or some definition of it, so you can write easily. Conclusion, for conclusion practice, what you can do, you can have a list of like 30 to 50 conclusion on important topics. For example, on climate change, or let's say elderly population, pandemic now, and there are several areas which are prominently in news or otherwise. You can make conclusion with respect to that. And if the question is new and you have not, even then also you can make a conclusion, and introduction you can build a context. So these things for every question and everyone can do. Now for other addressing the demands of the question. See, what happens when you do not have content, you try to skip the demand portion and write whatever you want. But now you develop a habit of writing just relevant subheading. Don't worry about content. If you do not have content, forget it. Remember that you will in future you will have that content. Or go through the, after writing that this kind of answer, go through the Google and see what content could have been written, and ultimately add to your notes, so your knowledge will also improve. And relevant subheading means you are now practicing how to address the demand of the question, because under these relevant subheadings, these are your you are actually taking cue from your questions, making subheadings, and ultimately your knowledge will go under these subheadings. I will explain through example few moments later, but this should be broad framework. Suppose how to you have some knowledge and you have made relevant subheadings, how to practice your content. So under those subheadings you can write just keywords. For example, I will tell you through the example, right? So if you practice in this way, what will happen is you will be under the habit of addressing the demands, as well as writing only the relevant things and skipping whatever is irrelevant. So this is the question. For example, introduction I have written and conclusion I have written. Now for this question I have made a subheading and under it two subheadings. So all the and then I have made keywords. If you have a keyword, it will not be very difficult for you to write or extract point on this. Anybody can do that. But thing is, these points should be in mind. That you have to build through your preparation. And based on this, I can just add on, make point under these subheadings and subheadings. I think this everybody can practice, and this will keep you on track, will prevent you from writing anything. Rather than writing a full-fledged answer, this will be more experience. You will be more difficult initially. You will feel it. But when things are difficult and you feel pressure on your brain, it means you are learning. That is one thing. This kind of structure will work mostly for your GS answers. But for subjective papers like sociology, what should be your strategy? Again, introduction and conclusion will work. For body part, you have to write in paragraphs. So just think about what you can write, what key points you can write in para 1, what key points will go in para 2, and these paragraphs will be linked, and you will be knowing key points. Ultimately you can easily elaborate on them. These things will be, ultimately you will be underlining, so these things will be highlighted and examiner will be looking into prominently. Other than this, you can also build a flow chart to address the demand of for the body part. That can also happen. So if you do not know many content on particular topic, so in your body part only 1 or 2 paragraph you can write 1 or 2 points, but that's okay. In future you will ultimately be building the content, and these things will improve. Or you go through the, after you write answer and you do not get sufficient number of paras or keywords, go through the content and think about what more paras you can add with respect to answer, keeping in mind the requirement of the question. That's how you can, I think initially you can practice this, and for as long as you are not in the habit of addressing the demand of the question, and until it becomes a very inculcated habit or ingrained into yourself, practice this kind of structure. And once this is done, then start writing full-fledged answer. So this was something that I wanted to tell you about addressing demand, and rest requirement we had already discussed. Maybe strategy videos I will keep making in future as well. Do share, subscribe and comment, and there are other videos, you can watch them. And in comments you can tell us what videos and what kind of videos, what topics you want me to cover in future videos. So that's it. Thank you. Thanks for watching.